Hello and welcome to the 220th episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter at HawkBlogger. And we're going to come and talk to you tonight about your first place Seattle Seahawks. The 2-2 Seattle Seahawks, who pulled off one of the craziest victories we have seen for a Seahawks team in many years, a 48-45 barn burner in Detroit over the Lions, where the Seahawks offense punted not once the entire game for the first time in franchise history. Lots to go over there. Lots to go over this week. Actually, I think a very fascinating matchup against a New Orleans Saints team that is a bit of an enigma and not what you might think when you first look at their record. But before we get into all that and other goodness, I'm going to bring in the crew. We have a special treat tonight. This is the Rational Crew. We have managed to shed ourselves of Nathan and Evan especially. We're going to have a rational conversation. So apologies if you're looking for takes on in and out and all that stuff. This is going to be a rational conversation about your Seahawks with the only other two people that could be part of that. First, Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG on Twitter. Dayna, it's so nice to have you back after you took at least a week off from our podcast, if not from your other 17 podcasts.
No, I didn't take a week off from the other one. I needed to take last week off. I'm glad I wasn't here because y'all were a little spicy last week. I was watching it here and there, and I'm like, you were a little wound up last week, to put it kindly.
Well, they kind of deserved it the week before. That was not a good loss at home against the Falcons. And then let's bring in Mr. Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. And folks, if you're listening and not watching, I have to tell you, Jeff, Jeff, why don't you tell everybody what jersey are you wearing right now?
I'm sure all of Seattle loves me right now, but I'm sporting my Blue Jays jersey. Don't know if you know, I probably never talk about them on Twitter or on the show. I'm usually the modest Canadian guy, but I am a Blue Jays fan. I've been a Blue Jays fan most of my life. And it's kind of a weird thing right now because my whole year, most of my timeline, to be honest, is football. I don't really follow a lot of baseball news. I watch the team. So it's, all year I've been reading about the Mariners and kind of intrigued by the Mariners and kind of excited. I watched the home run from them the other day, and then turned out we're playing you guys in the playoffs. So I got to sport my Blue Jays jersey. I can't remember the last time we played Seattle in any playoff series other than the MLS. I'm not an MLS guy. So it's kind of a new thing. And yeah, I was having some fun. Me and Joe Fan were kind of joking around on Twitter today and kind of going back and forth. And our pitching coach is named Pete Walker. So I wrote Pete Walker is greater than Pete Carroll. And we're kind of going back and forth. Yeah, I'm pretty into it. So sorry for everyone who's offended by my jersey. I know Mariners fans do not like Blue Jays and their fans when we take over that stadium, but for a couple of days, we're going to have to go at each other and it'll be fun.
I a question for you on that before we move off of it. Remind me, what was the Blue Jays season record against the Mariners this year?
We got swept by you.
It was 2-5, I believe.
I remember the last 4-game series. It was 4. I was actually at a bachelor party that weekend. Every time I looked at my phone, I didn't know if I was having too much fun, but every game the Jays were getting killed by you guys. So yeah, it's a tough series. You guys have good pitching, and
we've got a lot of commentary going on Twitter, in the chats. There's booths. See, Jeff is one of the most beloved parts of the show. Jeff and Dayna in general, their Q score would be super high. But Jeff is risking it all tonight with that jersey. And I got to say, I respect it. And it's hard for me to hate because the Mariners aren't in the playoffs often enough for me to really feel like we've got rivals. I hate the Astros. I don't want the Astros to do anything. I hate the Yankees because I will always hate the Yankees. Beyond that, don't really care much beyond that.
That's kind of how I feel. My sports hate is the Red Sox and the Yankees. I've grown to hate the Rays. I really hate the Rays, but I have no hatred for the Mariners. So there's a guy who's a Seahawks fan. He's part of Seahawks Twitter named Brandon Kuhn BK. He's a huge Blue Jays blogger. So he kind of tweeted out some fun stuff. He's like, the manager of the Blue Jays is named John Schneider, but he got hired in the middle of the season. So it's like always a weird back and forth when I see Brandon talking about John Schneider, because my mind always goes to the Seahawks GM, but it's the same spelling, same name as the Jays GM. I mean, the Jays manager right now. So it's really a worlds collide situation for me right now. Because again, my following is way more Seattle, and my whole timeline on Twitter is way more Seattle than Toronto.
Wow, you are taking center stage as villain for the podcast, and that's always a good thing. Villains are always popular, even though people are basically saying they're going to block you on Twitter after this. So just be aware, if your numbers go down, you know where it started.
Sorry, I have to.
So, God, there's so many places to take this. Last week, as Dayna mentioned, we spent a lot of the time talking about, look, the team looked bad enough and lost to what we believed to be a really bad Falcons team at home. And the defense had no answer for anything that Atlanta did, running inside, running outside, passing. Like, it was just a shit show. And we had a lot of conversation about, like, well, that's a team that could lose to pretty much anybody. And if they can lose to the Falcons like that, then they could potentially be bad enough that Pete Carroll could get canned. And that was the debate. We spent a lot of time. It's been 7 minutes. We got our first Dayna eye roll. It only took 7 minutes.
Sorry.
But yes.
Is that a record? It might be a record. Sorry.
that is what Dayna was happy to miss out on last week. I want to hear from both of you. After watching the Seahawks play the Lions, what's your story? Like, what do you think about this Seahawks team? What do you think about the coaching going on with the Seahawks team? How do you assess the state of this team and its progress from rebuilding sans Russell Wilson to wherever we want it to go? And Dayna, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I've said this to you guys. I've said it online. I'm just having so much fun watching this team. And I know that the defense really sucks. I get that. And we can argue about Jamal Adams and the impact he would have had, till we're blue, but I think that this defense originally was going to be planned quite a bit around him. And so now they're having to adjust that. I think that we're shocked at the back steps that so many players have taken and the regression that some of them have had on the defense, but at the same time where it's counterbalanced by this ridiculous offense that we never expected and we never even thought would show up. And so I'm so encouraged by the Shane Waldron offense right now and what is happening with it and what I'm seeing. And yet equally discouraged to a certain point with the defense. I will think that at the state of the Seahawks right now, they're better than I thought they'd be. I mean, I hate to say that, but they already have 2 wins. That's half of the ones I thought they'd get the whole year, right? Like, so I'm just so impressed with that. I like the way there seem to be a lot of adjustments this week in the offense, not slowing down in the second half, not getting so terrible. But at the same time, the defense that showed improvement in that first half was so porous and so bad in the second half of that game. And I think the Lions don't get enough credit for the offense that they put up there because, I mean, really, truly, they've been better than people thought. Their defense is equally as bad as ours. And so I think that, it counts with a lot of the production that we saw in that game. But I don't necessarily think Atlanta's as bad as people think they are. I think they're going to be now that Cordell Patterson is out, for a while. But so I don't know. I think that the fun thing about this is each week it's like, hell if I know. I said in a podcast yesterday, it seems like Pete Carroll's just throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks. And I kind of love it. Like, I just think it's kind of fun. And he's rolling with it. The whole thing with the flags cracked me up. I thought that was awesome. I know everyone else was so pissed and I thought it was hilarious. So I don't know. I'm really enjoying that because truly to me, this season is just about learning and growing, and we can go on and on about how it's the 4th game and they should be getting better. But remember how complete crap this defense was. I think it was last season. And by the end of the year, Yeah. But then by the end of the year, they had improved so much. So I'm waiting for that to see if that clicks. You never know. LJ Collier could be the missing cog that
Oh,
we have been needing. I'm
Dayna.
just
Oh,
teasing.
no,
I'm just
don't,
teasing.
please.
No, no.
Dayna.
I'm just kidding. But here's the thing. I really do
Golly.
like what I'm seeing because the expectation just isn't there. And so it's a lot of fun. And it's so different than what we've gotten for the last 5 years. I love it.
I think
love it.
that is a huge part of it. And Jeff,
Mhm.
when I'm watching these games, jerseys are the same. Some of the players are the same. On offense, it looks like a different animal. It looks like something, I would say it looks like something different than I've ever seen in Seattle before. I'm kind of curious, like, so yeah, where are you with this team?
I'm a little conflicted on two sides. I got one side talking my shoulder. I got the other side. Big picture, Brian, I really liked your write-up because I kind of came away with the same mindset coming out of the game. Obviously, we do need to talk about the defense, and it's a huge concern. But the way the offense played and really has been playing 3 of the 4 games, and I think it was overstated how bad they were in the second half against Denver. I rewatched that game. I think they were a couple drives away from being pretty good. I have been just loving watching the offense this year. And that was probably, to answer your previous question, they asked Dayna, Shane Waldron, I think that was by far his best game as a Seahawks coach. He had answers to everything, both schematically. And I think the most important part, and I talk about this a lot, I'm trying to see what's like repeatable. And the way they played offense, I think was unbelievable. It wasn't just like all the efficiency, and it's the way they've played. And I've talked about this in other shows, and I even know it's like David Sue had a kind of a hot take on this, but I just didn't enjoy watching the Russell Wilson offense the last few years. I just didn't. Admittedly, he is a great player. I'm not saying Russell Wilson wasn't great, kind of like what Davis said. I don't agree with that. But I just found watching him very, very frustrating. I found the inconsistency frustrating. I found just how much they relied on certain plays. And now that we're seeing him play in Denver, we're seeing a lot of that stuff that was kind of blamed on Seattle and even Pete to an extent has carried over with Russell. And just watching Geno and just the offense as a whole play and the way they're playing, the way they're using the whole field, the way they're using tight ends. I just think about how many times last year we thought, why is DK Metcalf not getting the ball? Why can't they run a simple slant with him? Why are they not able to get the ball? And the way DK, sorry, not DK. I know a lot of people call him that. The way he was used last game, that was a pleasure to watch. And like, I had so much fun. It's funny. A lot of my buddies thought I was absolutely nuts because I told them before last game that Geno Smith has been playing great. And like, they thought he's like finger pointing stats. And then he comes out and he wins NFC Player of the Week, kind of verifying the stuff I've been saying. And just watching him, the way he used the tight ends, the way he's making smart reads. Baldy did a great video on some of the stuff they did schematically and some of the stuff Geno read. Like, the common answer I got from people this week, I don't know about you, Brian, or you, Dayna, was Detroit's defense sucks. And I get that. That's definitely part of what happened for sure. But watch the throw Geno makes to Will Dissly and what he was looking at the time. Like, that is the antithesis of kind of the throw Russell Wilson has been making. It's just a high-level read. It's a high-level throw and a high-level diagnosis. Brian, I thought in your post-game pod I listened to it the other day, just the way you talked about how the quarterback's playing at the line of scrimmage and pre-snap, all this stuff, it's just been so different to what we've watched. And I know it was just one game, but it's been a pleasure to watch the offense. It's been fun to see someone use the whole field, use the tight ends, read the field. To me, like, again, Russell's a far more talented player than Geno will ever be, but I've really enjoyed watching this as a contrast. And it kind of shows that Russell was a limited player. And if you watched him play the Raiders, you saw a lot of the same stuff you've seen with Seattle, where they go a quarter and a half and they can't get a first down, like the Tennessee game last year, where everyone says, oh, Russell was amazing. There's a lot of revisionist history being there. And I'm on a tangent here, but anyway, I've just loved watching the offense play. And it sort of feels like when you're playing blackjack and you're on a heater and you're kind of expecting everything to come back to reality. And logic says they're going to come back to reality, but they keep getting better.
Yeah.
Can I say though, I'm sorry, can I say really quick? I don't think it has just been one game. If you go back and you watch what he's been doing, it was the first few games of the season, which for every team, you got to shake some rust off and you got to get there, right? But it hasn't just been this one game. I've now done 2 podcasts in a row that have really focused on Geno, and both of them are like, but look at this and look at this. And the one I did yesterday with Emery Hunt, who is he does national media, right? Like he knew, he called it, and you can go and look it up. In the beginning of preseason, he said Geno is going to kill it in this offense. This is made for him. And he's never, ever had the chance to do this type of offense with these type of players. Nobody bought it because he was a backup. And I think that he has proven so many people wrong. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Brian. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. And it gives me time because, I mean, I was looking something up. I was going to make this exact same point, which is, well, not maybe exact same, but first half of the game against Denver, Geno played essentially a perfect game, perfect half. And we were all like, holy crap. And I would guess every single one of us, especially after in the second half they didn't score, we're like, yeah, that was fun. And then the second game against the 49ers, you know, the offense scores 0 points. It's like, okay, you know, he's probably not going to be more than what we've expected him to be. The whole game against Atlanta was good. Whole game. And I think they win that game at Atlanta if there's not that holding call on Damian Lewis, which sounds like it was a real call. I have to go back and check. It seemed like a very ticky-tack call at the time, but in any event, I think he played well enough there. And then this game, he played a complete game, and what I've heard when people like kind of fight back against Geno is, well, he hasn't finished a game. He hasn't like won it in the clutch. Well, he did now. He did it actually multiple times in this game. I would say he did it 4 or 5 times in this game. And then the other thing they say is like, you know, he hasn't had to win it himself. Well, his defense just gave up 45 points, and so now he's done that. And like, I think they're running out of things to say that he hasn't done yet. And here's one stat that I don't think has been talked about enough. Like the Seahawks, for people that don't know, one of the things that makes them so watchable right now in offense is third down. This is a team that I can't tell you how many times I was like, 3rd and 7, man, I hope they can make this, but you know, I'm just prepared for them to punt, and they convert. Well, I just did a lookup of through 4 games, which teams in the NFL are best on 3rd and 7 plus. And I don't think it would surprise either of you to know that the Seahawks are first in the NFL in that category. They have converted. Keep in mind, like a good third down conversion rate is, what would you say, Jeff? Like 40, 42, something around there? 40?
Yeah, I'd say, high, low 40s.
Low 40s is like usually leading the NFL, maybe mid 40s, high 40s in a really powerful offensive year. On 3rd and 7 plus through 4 games, the Seahawks are converting 48%. 48% on 3rd and long. That is insane. That's insane. The teams close to them are like Miami, who is off to like a really strong start. Kansas City, Buffalo. Like nobody else is above 37% other than those teams. So like, I just have found what's going on there to be, it's one of one of my favorite things in sports in general, but I obviously follow football the most closely, is when the narrative doesn't match reality. And it takes humanity so long to catch up to with what's really happening. I love that. I remember when the Seahawks were a laughingstock for the 90s and nobody was going to games anymore. And it was like the Mariners were the talk of the town as they were coming up, right? It was the exact opposite of what it's been. I remember standing in what was at the time, I think still Seahawks Stadium, and watching a game against the Rams where can't remember who forced a fumble in the last 2 minutes, and then Matt Hasselbeck drove them down, and this was the greatest show on turf. They were like the big thing, and the Seahawks, I think they threw a touchdown to Corin Robinson. I can't remember who did it, but like to win the game at the end. And I just remember thinking, this is the turning. Like this is the people are going to come back now. And I guess I just feel like that was a moment where the city wasn't yet aware. The rest of the NFL was not yet aware of what was going to be the 2005 Seahawks, that they were coming. And I was there. I could see it coming. And I'm not saying this is a team that's bound for the Super Bowl in 2 years, but this is a team that they might not win 8 games. Like, I'm not saying that they're all of a sudden this crazy team, but this offense is significantly better than what anybody gives it credit for, even most of the people in the Seahawks fan base. So I think that's kind of fun. I mean, I like that. I'm not scared to be out here talking about it and be like, yeah, Geno Smith is one of the best quarterbacks in football right now. Don't care what he's not done in his history. That's just the truth right now.
I got into an argument on Twitter. I had posted something, I don't even remember what it was. And one of the responses to it was, oh, I had said that, I'd laugh in your face if you would have told me that after 4 weeks, we were all tied with the NFC West. Like, that would have been hilarious to me if you'd said that week 1. And the response was, would you be surprised that Geno Smith is the best quarterback in the division? And some he's a Broncos fan now. Broncos fan comes on. He's like, but he's not. I'm like, actually, he is. And people just can't wrap their head around it. It's so fun.
I don't even think it's close, right?
No, not really. No.
I mean, Stafford.
Yeah, I had Derek look it up for me.
Yeah, Stafford's been not great. And Jimmy Garoppolo clearly is not great. Kyler Murray has been struggling.
Average, yeah.
Like, it's not close.
Mm-mm.
So, I don't know. Like, so one of the things I'm really curious to hear both of your opinions on is, let's say by some crazy like awesomeness, this continues, at least on offense, and Geno plays to this level, which is, I don't know how he couldn't make a Pro Bowl if he continued at this level. He might, like, to be totally honest, he could be in an all-pro conversation if he continues to this level. He just won Player of the Week. What do you do next year? What do you do? Jeff, I'm curious. Like, what's your instinct? Where do you go?
I think it's a great situation, and you hedge it, and you have 2 first-round picks, but now it just doesn't put an emphasis on having to draft the quarterback potentially, or having to potentially get in the top 5. But remember, Geno's 32 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're probably not investing in Geno, even if he has his best year, as your franchise quarterback. I think what you have to do is you have to look at Geno as a bridge quarterback, and a lot of people probably thought of him more like that Tavares Jackson, where kind of you're just using him to get through a year. But I think the best way to look at him is sort of how the Rams used Jared Goff years ago to eventually upgrade to someone else. But I think you kind of get the best of both worlds, where maybe you take a quarterback with your second first-round pick and you spend the first pick on defense. Or you can take more of a project. There's a couple of quarterbacks who are ready to play now, but maybe there's someone they like who's more of a project, and Geno can transition you a little bit longer, rather than what I would have thought probably going into this year was they're probably going to end up in the top 3, and they very well might with that defense. But taking CJ Stroud, who's ready to play next year, obviously that's the number 1 priority long-term, but I think you have a little more flexibility now with Geno, and I'm not coming in and signing Geno to like a $20 million contract thing. Okay, he can get you through the next 5 years. I think you hedge yourself and you still try to get a quarterback for the long term. But Geno is a little better than I personally thought. He's a lot better than I thought based on what he played this year. And I think he can be just a bridge for a little bit longer, and you can ease someone into it, sort of like the Alex Smith Mahomes situation. Obviously, I'm not expecting them to draft Mahomes, but just the way those two were used, you can really bring a quarterback along and maybe go with someone a little more developmental. It gives you the flexibility to do a lot of things, or you're bringing 2 to compete next year. So I think if they play well, it's a great situation for the Seahawks.
I mean, Dayna, my setup for this that I was asking about, that I want your opinion on as well, is that Geno keeps this up. And so through 4 games, I mean, you times his numbers by 4. Granted, there's even a game beyond that, so it could be above this. But like, you're talking about, over 4,000 yards passing. You're talking about 24 touchdowns, high 20s touchdowns, and just like 8 interceptions. You're just talking about one of the most prolific quarterbacks from an efficiency standpoint that we've seen in recent years. what do you do? Do you sign him to a long-term deal? And by that I mean like more than 2 years. Do you think he would sign anything less than a long-term deal? Do you franchise tag him? Do you let him go and take the comp pick? What would you want to see the team do?
I think that we talked about this at the beginning of the season. And Jeff, I think it was you that said one of my biggest nightmares is that Geno's going to play well enough and they're not going to grab a quarterback in the draft. And that is mine too. In fact, the last couple of mock drafts I've looked at, they have both first round picks being defensive players for Seattle, which freaks me out. I'm not going to lie. Like, I just don't know that this quarterback class will be repeated anytime soon. However, there might be some, kind of like Jeff said, that would be a little bit later. Here's the thing. If Geno keeps this up, manages to stay healthy, and the defense or the offense is really just kind of clicking with him, it would be really hard to not turn around and sign him. Do you sign him for a 3-year deal? I don't know that. Just because that puts him then at what, 35. But at the same time, there's always ways to get out of that. I think that you would have to there'd be a lot of pieces in play there. You would have to look at what quarterbacks are coming down the pike in a couple of years, which ones now that they could sit and develop if they needed to develop it. If it were me personally, I think I still want him to take a higher pick quarterback. I do. But at the same time, I don't think I'd be mad anymore if he kept this up. I don't think I'd be mad if they didn't do that anymore. 2 games ago, if you had told me that, I'm like, hell no, they are taking a quarterback. This is not how this works. I know you got
mad at me. But you got mad.
I know. Well, I did, because it was illogical to me. It was right after the Niners game, for God's sake, right? Like, I'm like, that is illogical. I don't understand. But I really do think if he can continue it, and then you have to play the how long. Like, if the last 4 games he drops off, but he played good the rest of the season, blah, blah, blah. Oh, there's so many subtleties to this game. But I think it would not anger me if he continued to play this well throughout the season and they decided to keep him for a couple more years.
Yeah, where I'm at on this as of now, I said this on the post-game show as well. I think the no-brainer at this point is that you franchise tag him. And that's something I don't think people are necessarily thinking about as much, but you'll pay him a shit ton of money for 1 year, and you have the cap space to do it next year. All sorts of stuff's falling off the cap. You still draft a young quarterback. I still would generally do that. But then you have some options like from there. But like, if you can get Geno Smith to sign a 2-year deal after a year like this, I would do that too. I would do that. Beyond that, I start getting uncomfortable. And the challenge here is what I want them to do versus what they will do are 2 totally different things. And I think Pete and John, and honestly, like, it's defensible, right? They'd be like, if we have our quarterback, we found the person who fits what we're doing, runs our offense, knows it really well, knows the receivers, and everything's like going gangbusters. Why are we changing him out? Why wouldn't we become great on defense and get our version of Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack, or name your big defender, and then another great player, and boost up? Like, there's logic to that. There really is. What bothers me about that approach is I think it really shortens your window, because now your window is as long as Geno's career. And so you've got to be good enough in the next 3 years, probably 4 years, to win a Super Bowl. And you've got to bet that Geno's ceiling is to be able to beat a Patrick Mahomes, in a big game. And we haven't seen that yet. So like, that's where I'm like, I don't know if I'm really ready to throw my hat in that ring.
And it's a little early too. I mean, I think you could have that conversation after week 8 and have it have a little more weight to it, if you could see what they could do for that long period of time. The other thing too, and this is brought to my attention, you could do what they did with Flynn and Wilson, is you bring the kid in and let him duke it out and see who wins it. Yeah, it just makes more sense if you're going to bring him in, let him see what happens. Because then what are you going to end up doing if you don't? You're going to end up in a situation like Pittsburgh, where they're chanting for Pickett in the middle of the game. They bring him in. Pickett's the same quarterback as Trubisky. I mean, they're just like, but it's, you don't want that kind of division. So you literally let them duke it out and see what happens.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot more about Geno. Brian brought up a good point, but we saw the one game against a team that was against a kind of a contender level team. And obviously they played a little different. They were very conservative, but we saw what happened when the Seahawks played the Niners, who look like a Super Bowl level defense. In the next few weeks, they're going to play Justin Herbert. They're going to play the Rams eventually. They're going to play Patrick Mahomes. So I think we're going to get a really good evaluation on how Geno matches up against those kind of players. And ultimately, I think no matter what, they got to draft a quarterback early. I think they would be foolish not to. I totally agree with Brian. I can see them going that other way. But you got to just set this franchise up. And like John Schneider scouted Will Levis this week. He's a top 5 level player. So, you know, he was at the game. So they're certainly doing their due diligence. But I think, yeah, what Dayna said, I think shortening the window and really going in with, you don't want to end up like the Jimmy G 49ers, and then you're forced to be desperate and give up 3 first-round picks. This really gives you an opportunity to set up the short and the long term, which is what the Chiefs did. And that's the example I cited.
So there's a great point in chat, and I've got to bring it up because I think it's a great point. It comes from Nathan Wise, and he says, I'm confused. Geno's 2 years younger than Russ. Now, why does that matter? That matters because if Russell Wilson was on this team and we had 2 first-round picks, high first-round picks next year, we would not be talking about how you've got to draft a young quarterback. It would be a conversation. There'd be some debate, but we'd be like salivating over the idea of getting 2 blue chip defensive players to solve this massive problem we've got on defense. And so really the only thing holding us back from feeling that way is that, and by the way, Geno's not only younger, but he will still be cheaper next year. Even if he finishes this year playing really well, he will be significantly cheaper. So he won't be cheap relative to a rookie quarterback, but he'll be cheap relative to Russ. So I don't know. I think that's a good point.
I get what he's saying for sure, but you got to think about the track record. It's hedging a bet. Geno's been good for 4 games in his NFL career.
No, but we're talking about if he's good for the whole year.
Yeah,
that's the prompt.
But even so, you have, just because you're good for the whole year now, are you going to be good again next year? So I think you have to hedge your bet just based on a career track record. And there's nothing wrong with it. If Geno's good and they draft a rookie and Geno keeps playing well, play him. I'm totally fine with that. If he takes, obviously the craziest example of that is Favre and Rodgers. And again, this is not Favre and Rodgers, it's Geno Smith. But they drafted Rodgers, they played him in 3 years, and they had a window that extended 15 years. Like, I don't see the harm in drafting a quarterback with these picks because it's more about the track record. The reason Russell Wilson is he's been doing it for 10 years. It's a stable. He's actually, maybe not. He's starting to fall off the map a little bit, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know, Dayna. I mean, you love defense, Dayna.
I know.
Tell me you don't want to add. You want to see Cody Barton again next year?
Stop it. No, don't be ridiculous.
You want your boy LJ Collier?
Oh, he's my boy now. I thought he was your boy. What happened?
Max effort.
Oh, that's right.
LJ
You're cute,
Collier.
Jeff. Yeah.
I mean, like the idea of getting 2 defensive linemen, interior and edge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
We talk about quarterbacks. It hasn't been easy finding those guys for this team, right?
So,
especially interior. I mean, when's the last time the Seahawks drafted a defensive tackle that was like a Pro Bowl level disruptive force?
Cortez Kennedy.
Right.
Marcus Tubbs for a year.
Marcus Tubbs was awesome that 1 year. Yeah. Brandon Meebane was great, but he was not disruptive.
Not in the same way.
Brandon.
Yeah. Very different player.
Yeah.
So yes, I get it. And it was brought, once again, it was mentioned to me yesterday. It's like, what is his name? Will Anderson, whatever this player is. They're like, it's the only guarantee in the draft next year is this kid. And he could be sitting there because everyone else, they're like these mock drafts. It's like the Texans are going to take Stroud and the Bears are going to take the, you know what I mean? And so like all of this, and it's like, he'll be sitting there, Dayna, waiting. Don't you want him? And I'm like, well, yes, but what do those quarterbacks down the way a little bit? The beauty of that is we do have 2 first-round picks. And so I think the really quarterback needy teams will move up pretty quickly or already be there, probably, let's be honest. And so there might be someone else sitting down there. So if they take this perfect defensive specimen for that very top pick, then yeah, but I still want him to get a quarterback with that second one. And hopefully Denver will be crappy enough that it's pretty high, right? Like that's what we're hoping for.
Oh, that is you're making me like so excited, Dayna,
it's
because
so crazy.
Anytime you can talk about Denver being bad, it just puts a smile on my face.
But Gino, if he plays like this all year, might take them out of quarterback range. Like there isn't 9 quarterbacks in this draft. There's probably 3 or 4 that you would think are blue chip prospects, maybe 3. So that's where it gets interesting, because if they finish, say, 12th pick or something, do you want to give up the picks to move up and get that quarterback with all these needs on defense? It becomes a very interesting conversation in that regard.
It does. And I think we keep forgetting, or like, I think in general, don't talk about it. It's not like we talk about just the first round. It is 2 firsts and 2 seconds.
Yeah.
2 firsts and 2 seconds. Like you're talking about 4 players, most likely in the top 40, top 45 players picked, and what's looking like a pretty good draft. So I think the team's got some options. I think it's gonna be really a fascinating sub story this whole time, and I love that twist from Nathan Wise in chat about, our biases are showing. They're showing. It's the fact that Geno Smith is named Geno Smith and not Russell Wilson. But we just spent the first 20 minutes of the show talking about why Geno Smith is playing the position better than Russell Wilson's played this position for at least the last few years.
And yet we're ready to get rid of him. Yeah. It's weird. It really is. I just want to remind everyone that the draft's in Kansas City next year. So come on, come on down to party with me. It'll be so fun. Ooh, think about how fun that would be.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
You got to get us in though, Dayna.
Actually, yeah.
I will do my best.
It's a good time to come to KC, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
That was actually a commitment from Dayna on record. She's going to make it happen.
I said I will do my best.
Yeah, that is commitment. So I am like, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because offense, I think we're all giddy about. I think I want to talk about how we think they'll match up with the Saints. We'll get into that in a second. But there's another part that I think we might either all see similarly or differently, and I don't know. But like, I think, Dayna, you and we saw progress on defense, right? Like,
definitely.
I saw a team that in the first quarter, I saw run fits that were better. I saw gaps that were filled. I saw tackles that were made. I saw a team that was trying to run, getting 3 to 5 yards instead of 8 to 25 yards for every run that they like. Cordero Patterson was not getting touched for like 10, 15 yards in the Falcons game. Like, it was just awful. And then we saw some turnovers, and it wasn't like anytime you give up 45 points and 500 plus yards, you're not like, hey, that was a great game. But I'm in the mindset of, okay, maybe this team cannot be the worst defense in football. Maybe they can find a way schematically, start to settle in. Maybe they can be 20th in the NFL. Like, maybe that's a realistic target for them. And if they're that, and they've got this offense, then I think this team could win some games. I'm curious where you both are at on the defense. Jeff, you want to start?
Oh yeah, I'll start. I don't think you're too far off about the biggest thing when you watch the Niners game and the Falcons game was how they just were so bad at run defense. And to me, that's the most demoralizing thing a defense can do. When you can't play run defense and they're running at will, like some of those Cordero Patterson runs, the Niners game just looked like you could tell within 5 minutes. I remember texting you, Brian, that the game was over in 5 minutes. They just had that look of a team that dominates the trenches. So in the first quarter and a half, they looked fine defensively. Like Shelby Harris, you saw some of his pass rush win rates, and they were much better at getting off blocks on defense. Still pretty bad. They're not winning up front very much, but their run defense and their run fits look better. And to me, that compared to the absolute hopelessness of that 49ers game, and still a pretty horrible performance against Cordarrelle Patterson against a pretty average offensive line. To me, that was why we were so down last week. He had 45 points against a team with Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift out. It was still pretty bad, but they did show some signs. The hardest thing for them right now, and really when you're evaluating defense, and one of the old personnel things is you're as bad as you're as strong as your weakest link. And right now, Seattle has two very, very weak links that as much as they want to find improvements, unless they can follow these two weak links, they're going to have problems all year. And if the best example is if you remember the Eagles play the Patriots in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, Malcolm Butler was our enemy in Seattle, but he got benched by Bill Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
And they had no nickel corner essentially. And even the Seattle example, if you remember, Jeremy Lane went out and Thurl Simon, this is the LOB. One weak link can sink an entire defense. And it was Thurl Simon in that Super Bowl. It was that New England slot corner in that Super Bowl. Seattle's got two. Cody Barton and Josh Jones are playing at an atrocious level. And Barton was absolutely terrible by far. He was bad in the Atlanta game. This was by far his worst game. And Josh Jones, like almost every game, there are plays that the drop-off from Jamal Adams to him is so big.
Yep.
And Dayna mentioned it earlier, but right now it's just Jamal was their best player in defense, and playing Josh Jones is probably their worst player other than Barton. And those two guys make the job. Again, you're as bad as you're strong as your weakest link, and they got two right now.
Dayna, one of the reasons the Seahawks right now are like enjoyable for me is because we're not arguing with each other as Seahawks fans about whether or not it's Russell that's the problem or Pete that's the problem or whatever. Now, a small echo of that continues, which is whether Cody Barton is the problem or other people are the problem. Why? Like, what am I missing that like people are defending Cody Barton?
I don't know. You know, in the Denver game, he had like two splash plays. Like he got a tackle for loss on one, and
that's
I don't
right.
even remember the other ones.
Yeah.
He had these two splash plays, and we were all like, "Oh, holy crap! Maybe he actually figured something out." And then the second half game, you're like, "Nope, he didn't. He didn't figure anything out." Right? You know, and you're right. There is, I mean, even amongst our group, like people who are like, why does everyone hate Cody Barton? Why do you like Cody Barton? I mean, I'm sure he's a very nice gentleman, and I'm sure he was raised very well by his parents. I mean, I'm not talking about him personally. I'm just saying that one, you posted the clip, Brian, of him in this last game where he's going this way and he was like, whoa, oh, where'd he go? Like he looked so lost on defense. It was ridiculous. I can't
That wasn't
figure
even his
out.
worst play.
I know, but it was hilarious. But hilariously sad, to be quite honest. But here's the thing. You know, I know Nathan in our group, and he's not here to say anything, but he does say he really feels like there are players on the defensive line that are playing worse than Cody Barton. I'm not saying that they're playing super well. I don't see how you can say they're playing worse. And I know that, and this is what I told him, and this is what I'll say. You see those players make plays. I don't see Cody Barton even making his plays, sometimes not even being on assignment. Like it's so confusing to me. But we have said from the get-go on the show, and I think almost everyone agrees, linebacker is the biggest issue on this team. And we are seeing the gaping hole that Bobby Wagner left, even though the Rams are struggling in that area too. But I'm not saying that Bobby would have solved all the problems, but we're just seeing the huge talent difference there.
Oh, Bobby made a better tackle on a fan than Cody Barton's made on a player.
And is now getting sued for like charges against him for it or something.
No
stupid.
way, really?
Yeah, the guy filed a police report for like assault and battery against Bobby Wagner.
Oh my God. I hope that guy gets. Oh, that's.
I know.
It's
pretty dumb.
So as far as problems on this defense, as much as I talk about Cody Barton a lot and I agree on Josh Jones, I think the defensive line is the biggest problem on this defense.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I believe that that their lack of pass rush, their lack of being able to control the blockers in front of them is leading to all sorts of other problems. And there's no one on that defensive line that is consistently disruptive. Shelby Harris is probably the closest to that. And Al Woods has some moments for sure, but like this is, I would guess it's the 32nd out of 32 defensive lines in the NFL. I think the linebacker crew might be 31 out of 32. Like I think they're really bad. I just don't think that position is as important as the defensive line. So I just think the front seven is probably the worst front seven in the whole NFL.
Right now, yeah. I don't think it's close.
And what happened? How did that change? Because there was so much that we thought would be promised going into this year. It's just gone.
Well, there's a couple things. They did switch some of their schemes, and there are some things that Brian mentioned this too. I heard this too. It jumped off the page. KJ Wright was talking about some of their defensive linemen, and they're just poor fits for what they're doing schematically. And one of them that they mentioned was Quinton Jefferson, which is Brian pointed out to us or on Twitter. It's pretty alarming. They signed a guy in the offseason, a new defense, who KJ thinks doesn't fit their defense. And the role of the defensive line in the 3-4 is more of a eating gaps versus penetrating. And Poona Ford and Quinn Jefferson are really good, like penetrating defensive linemen. They're not the guys who are eating up blocks and creating lanes for their players. And Poona has been such a reliable player in this defense. He's one of the highest paid players on the team. He's just getting blown off the ball in the system, and it's not helping him. It's kind of going away from his strength. Al Woods has been fine. He's been doing his job. And Darrell Taylor, who's a guy we thought was going to be an emerging player, is now at the player level where he's going to get benched on early downs, and he's basically a rotational pass rusher. And he's not winning at that. So other than Uchenna Nwosu, who's been pretty good, he's been probably their best front seven guy. There's just no player and Al Woods, there's no one who's above average right now. And guys like Poona and Taylor, we would have expected to be high-level players on this team based on what they've done in the past or what they showed last year. They're close to zero, especially Taylor is close to a zero right now. And that is a huge blow. Boye Mafe looks okay, but they don't have any front seven guys who are flashing. And to win the league, you watch the Niners play, or some of the best defense. The Niners and the Cowboys are the two best defenses in the league right now, just from like a watchability and from a disruptive standpoint. That whole pass rush versus coverage thing to me keeps looking more laughable as we get along, and you see who disrupts all these games. But they don't have disruptors in the front seven, and they don't have guys who are winning blocks in the front. So it's impossible to play defense with a front seven that bad.
I got to say, we've said this before. Roquan Smith, who people keep bringing up, is not the answer, folks. We're not trading high draft capital for a veteran, costly linebacker. It's not like it is. If they do that, it is a awful move. I will be furious. I will be irate. That is a terrible decision. It will not solve the problem. It will exacerbate and actually potentially keep you from ever becoming in the next few years a contender again. So like linebacker, if somehow you could make a trade for Aaron Donald and he was committed to sticking around, then yeah, maybe that's one of the only interior linemen I would consider mortgaging our future for. But there's not that many others. Like, this team needs to be getting young players, drafted players. It has to go that direction. There's not a shortcut. The only thing that I think could be is picking up some guys off the streets, like trying, I don't know who the free agents are now. I haven't looked recently in terms of defensive line, but like JPP just signed with the team a week or so ago. Like, there's some of those guys that you could potentially look at, but I don't know. My thought is I think this defense could potentially step forward more. This week against the Saints is going to be interesting. I think this game is really interesting. I know we've got some Patron questions, so why don't we, if we can, Dayna, if we can take some Patron questions, and then let's talk about the Saints game, if you all are able to stay a little bit past the hour. While Dayna's looking those up, I will just say, if you haven't already, please give the show a like. Appreciate it. Takes just a second to do, and you can click the bell to get notified when we go live. And then head on over to hawkblogger.com. Head over there too. You can read the Tail of the Tape article we put up this morning. But go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger and get sign up to be a patron. Get access to the Slack channel and get to ask these questions that we're about to answer for you. And please, if you haven't already as well, go to Apple, your podcast app, and give us a 5-star review on Google Play, on Apple, anywhere you see the podcast. That is super helpful, and we really appreciate it. So with that, Dayna, hit us with some questions.
Interesting thing is there's only 4 questions this week, and you've actually already answered most of them. So it'll be interesting. I hope that we answered the questions. So Brondi and Imani both asked about Geno and what it would be to keep him. And so I hope that we thoroughly went over that for them. Imani wanted to know, are the numbers good enough to extend him? How much better does he need to be in order for you to be convinced he's the short-term answer quarterback for the next couple of years? Brondi asked for, given his performances and the defense, would you spend that pick on a defense sort of thing? So I hope that we answered those 2 questions for you guys. Then this one is actually for Jeff. It's from Has No Clue, which is a good name. I like that. It says, Jeff, as someone with experience covering the NFL at large, isn't there a linebacker on a practice squad somewhere that would have a higher ceiling than Cody Barton, or at least more assignment sound?
I'm sure there is, but again, I think you look at it realistically, and you're fixing a symptom, you're fixing a problem, but you're not fixing the symptom of the problem. So yeah, sure, it would help the better linebacker play, and it's been a little surprising they haven't added to the room. And I know Pete mentioned Christian Jones is a guy who could play a little bit. He was with Sean Desai in Chicago, and maybe he'll play a bit. But I think really the issue is more of the front 7 guys and more of the front 3 and the edge rush. And I think if you're solving problems, I think really, yeah, you can switch out linebackers. And it's exactly what Brian said with Roquan Smith. Sure, if you have a better second linebacker, a couple of things, you'll get some better tackling. But bigger picture, you're not going to do that much. Maybe take a big play away. Maybe you stop the bleeding. But until you fix the ability to win blocks in the front and win on pass rush, you look at like what Bosa and what TJ Watt does and what Micah Parsons is doing. It's hard to win when you don't have a guy like that. It's hard to play good defense when you don't have a guy like that. And if you, so they can find an upgrade potentially, but find someone who knows their defense, who can be assignment correct. I don't think that exists on a practice squad. Maybe you can get someone who's talented and try to develop them, but you're not really solving the problem here.
Let me give you a couple names just on that topic before we move on. Do you think any of these players could potentially help the Seahawks defensive line? First one is Brandon Williams from Baltimore, defensive tackle, nose tackle type. Second, Ndamukong Suh. Third, Linval Joseph. And then we start getting into guys like Star Lutulele, things like folks like that. And then you've got edge guys like D Ford, for example. Any of those guys interesting enough that the Seahawks should be looking to bring them in?
I think it would depend on what they cost. Let's just say vet minimum.
Yeah. Forget the cost for the time being.
Okay.
Can they
I
help?
mean, at this point, could it hurt? I don't know that they could hurt, except for they could get hurt and then be worthless, but because they're kind of old. But, I think, I think much like the offense, you kind of got to throw almost anything at the board and see what sticks a little bit. Not Ndamukong Suh. That's all I have to say about that one. But, I don't know, Linval Joseph, how old is he? He's got to be like 37.
Linval Joseph is like 33.
Shut up.
Yeah.
He's
yeah.
broken down with injuries.
Yeah, that's why I assumed he was so much
issues.
older. yeah.
I think Brandon Williams probably. He's played in that kind of defense where he's been more of like a 2-gapper who can eat up blockers. And I don't know what his health's like. I don't know what kind of shape he's in, but Sue is more of a penetrating defensive tackle. And that would be helpful, but really you don't want to block other guys. And Shelby Harris, I think, is pretty good in that role. I think what you need is the guys to win up front and maybe use Puna Ford a little differently, maybe kind of a unique role. And if you can get more of the Al Woods types to kind of help transition you, that would help. So I can see someone like Brandon Williams being appealing and maybe kind of move Puna around, use him a little creatively because he's not a great role to kind of win on the edge and help set the edge for other players.
Yeah. I have to
There's
admit,
just not much
the
out
guy
there.
I'm still just like annoyed that we haven't even heard anything about is Landon Collins. Like,
Yeah.
he's so much like Jamal Adams, and he's got clear limitations, and he hasn't been great the last couple of years. That's why he's available, but really, like, there's no chance he's more valuable than Ryan Neal or Josh Jones. Like, this is a guy that was like, there were years where he was considered like a defensive player of the year candidate, like Jamal Adams. So anyway, I don't know. That one seems like he could play some of the role that they had in mind for Jamal Adams. They're very similar, but anyway, sorry. Go on, Dayna, with your Patreon questions.
No, and we have to remember there is a roster spot open on the team right now. I did put that out there. Yeah, a little bit. You never know. You never know what could happen.
Never know.
So Imani came back on and she threw in a last-minute question. Last minute, Imani, what else? It says, who are some of your favorite front seven prospects projected early if we don't get a good shot at a quarterback? Brian, do you know?
Oh man, I'm the wrong person to ask. I've heard the same names that you guys mentioned before.
Yeah.
And then I saw a couple highlights of the 415-pound Florida defensive tackle, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Give me
to
that.
be honest with you, that question needs to be asked in December after you see how well they've played all season. And it's a great question. And I'm sure we will talk about it at length later in the season. But I'm like
Dayna, you said that perfectly. I have kind of a pattern of how I go through this every year. And obviously we've given away so many first round picks. I really don't get into the draft until probably the combine. So basically the way this draft clock works, and we'll probably have better answers to this, is there's two like upper level prospects. Maybe the two best guys entirely. They're both front four guys. One of them is Will Anderson, you mentioned before, from Alabama. He's like a Von Miller type prospect, like top of the line, elite. There's a defensive tackle at Georgia who Trevon Walker went first last year, and all those guys from Georgia. This guy apparently was the best guy on the team. He's hurt right now. He's hurt his hamstring in the first game. So his numbers are down. People are, I know some of the other Seahawks bloggers are like, I'm not sure how good he is. He's hurt. So it's a little different. After those guys, there's like a bunch of defensive linemen at Clemson. There's a couple other guys, but I can't quite give you names yet. So I don't dive into this until probably February. I'm in NFL mode, and then I switch to draft mode. So it's a fun thing to follow. Like Matt Miller does a really good job. Jordan Reed on ESPN. But again, it's a great thing to revisit after the year, especially once we know where they're drafting.
Right. All right. So then the other question that we hadn't already answered is from Troy Fagan. And he said, what bets do any of the HB crew have going with Jeff Simmons for this MJ's wildcard series? We need to think of some. I don't think there are any.
No, we have nothing on the books as of yet.
Are Nathan and Evan Mariners fans?
Evan certainly is not. He might feign Mariner interest now because it's gotten popular, but he has been a active troll of Mariners Twitter for many years. So no, I think Nathan might be passively interested, but I haven't heard.
I know Josh kind of likes them. And
Will Cornell is a Mariners.
Yeah, he's a good Mariners guy.
Yes.
Yeah, we should come up with one.
Yeah. It should be like one of those mayoral bets where they're like, we'll bet you like some smoked salmon from Puget Sound for, I don't know what the hell's Toronto
maple syrup. Yeah.
Maple syrup for beer.
What do you got in Toronto? I don't even know.
Like, I have no ill will towards the Mariners in a way. Like, if the Mariners win, I won't be that upset. Like, it's a cool story. If the Jays were playing, or if the Mariners were playing the Astros, we would play in the next round. Then it's a fiery thing, but like,
that's the thing. It doesn't really matter because the Astros are like, it is like night and day between them and pretty much everybody else.
Yeah.
We'll
come up with something though. We'll make it fun.
We'll figure it out. Are those all our questions, Dayna?
That's it, guys. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those. And thanks, patrons. Head on over to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, get to be part of the Slack community, which is fun, growing. And they talk about Seahawks, Mariners all the time, whether we're doing a pod or not. So go on over there and keep the conversation going. So let's talk about this Saints game. I wrote my article this morning, and I at this point, all I have time for is to like research the teams that we're going to play when I write the article. I don't think about it much beforehand. So I'm like any other fan before I do that. And I'm still like any other fan. But I walked into that and like, okay, the Saints are 1-3. This is not a good team. They lost to, I think their only win was by 1 point over the Falcons or something like that. Like it's not impressive. They lost to the Panthers. And then I looked at the numbers and it's like offensively, yards per play, rushing, passing, pretty good, even though Jameis Winston's been out and they've had Andy Dalton playing. Defensively, pass rush is pretty good. Yards per play is pretty good. Like coverage, they've got some players. They've got Honey Badger. They've got Cam Jordan, and they've got guys. So I don't know what to make. This team is one of the worst teams in the NFL in turning the ball over. And that's part of why they have the record they have. They are the worst team in the league in field goal percentage. They've made only half of their kicks. 50%, which is not a good rate. So this feels like, to me, in the category of like the Broncos game. Like I think they're a similar level talent team to the Broncos, which was not an easy game for the Seahawks. I don't know where my head's at. I'm kind of curious where you guys are on this game, how you see this game, what a win would mean in your mind. Who would it prove more about the offense or the defense if they were able to win this game? Dayna, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I have not had a chance to read your article yet, but correct me if I'm wrong. But the Saints are pretty good defensively. Is that correct?
They are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Not like 49er level good, but they're pretty good defensively. And so I think that will be a great test for Geno, right? Okay, so last week we know the defense sucked, but this week it's better. And so how he comes through on that, it'll be inside, it's in the dome. It'll be, I'll be there. And the Seahawks have never lost a game that I've been at. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I know.
That's the kind of insight we need. And look, the Seahawks have never had trouble tackling Alvin Kamara. Like never. They always tackle him really well. Go on. Yes.
But I do think that the Saints are also a pissed off team. This is a team that wants to win a couple of games. They know that they should have won that game in London, and they probably should have won a couple more games. This is definitely a better team than their record. And I know the saying is you are what your record says you are. Well, not really, especially not the first few games of the year. So I think that this will be a really good test for the offense. I don't expect anything out of this defense ever. So even though it's Andy Dalton and it's like, oh, that should be a good thing. Why? It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters which quarterback is out there right now, except for we did see improved play, I feel, from members of the secondary. I loved what Tariq Woolen did last week. I loved that pick six. It was great. He now has 2 interceptions. I'm still waiting, Quandre. God dang it. You're making me wait a long time for my pick six. But so I think that because though Tariq especially is kind of settling into his role, I think we could see better things out of him too. But I don't know. This is a hard one.
Yeah, Jeff, is a top 10 defense by DVOA, by pretty much any measure. It's a top 10 defense they'll be going against. It's an offense that, depending on your metric, is 10 to 20, somewhere in that range. What are you seeing in this game?
So I've watched most of their games. I didn't see a lot of the Carolina game because that game could have been less interesting to me. But they played at my time, 9:30 a.m. in London. So I watched the whole game last week. And it's a lot of what Brian said. Their talent level, if you eliminate the quarterback, is really, really strong. They've added one of the best rookies in the whole league. Chris Olave was a top 12 pick. He's been great. And he's like leading the league in air yards. He's going to be a really tough guy. But him and Woolen would be a fascinating matchup. And Mike Thomas, who's been their other receiver, is hurt and he might not play. So Woolen against Olave is a really interesting match. Defensively, it's a really tough assignment for the Seahawks. Their front gave the Seahawks a ton of trouble last year. Mm-hmm. Remember, they were running plays right into that line a lot. And Geno Smith just couldn't, other than that deep ball to DK, they had a lot of trouble. So this is going to be really telling to see the progression from last year to this year of how they look, because that front is really strong. Cam Jordan's still one of the best players in the league, and Minnesota is a team that's been hyped by a lot of people, and they should have beat Minnesota. There was a really egregious call from the refs that got Minnesota in the winning field goal position. And it's sort of what Brian said. They've been really sloppy all year. And Jameis Winston, who's been their quarterback, is a penchant for turnovers. He's turned the ball over a lot. And Andy Dalton came out last week. He was a little more stable, but their special teams fumbled twice last week. And that gave Minnesota 6 points, which won the game. So the thing watching them is they're sloppier than they have been in the past. And a lot of it is the drop off. Sean Payton retired this offseason, took the year off.
Mm-hmm.
And the drop off from him to Dennis Allen is significant.
Sure.
And it's why a lot of people around the league are pretty low on the Saints, because Sean Payton's one of the best coaches in the NFL, and Dennis Allen's is kind of just the guy. And so they still do have the talent, but they're sloppy, and they've been sloppy in every game. And Baker Mayfield, who's by all indications the worst quarterback in the NFL, beat this team. And Christian McCaffrey ran for 120 yards on them, and Atlanta went up like 27-3 on them. And Kirk Cousins was kind of throwing the ball over the yard on them last week. So just from a personnel standpoint, I think they match up really well with Seattle. I think Vegas has been pretty high. I think the Saints line just keeps moving up and up. But there's a couple of things to remember. They're coming back from London this week. They did not take the bye. So teams have the option to take the bye after their London game, and they decide to play this week. So that might be an interesting thing to watch, and what their time zone is going to be like, what their body clock is going to be like. So that could be in Seattle's favor. But that front seven and their corners are really, really good. Now they have the Honey Badger at safety, who had a really nice interception last week. So just from like a talent standpoint, eliminating the quarterback, they're much further ahead of Seattle, and I think they're going to give Seattle trouble. But if Seattle comes out and maintains this offense against this defense, which Brian pointed out is pretty damn good, I think that's going to be super optimistic. I'm kind of expecting things to level out a bit. There's a lot of hype around Geno right now, player of the week. People might be buying their hype a lot this week, so I'm a little worried about that. But if they come out and play well against this defense, that's going to be super optimistic, because on offense, they're kind of a weird team. They have a good offensive line. Alvin Kamara's coming back. They should give our front seven trouble. But I think the game comes down to how Geno and them can operate against Cam Jordan and David Onyemata and some of those. Marcus Davenport's a really good pass rusher. And how does our offensive line go up? We did well against Detroit, but this is a much better front. And to me, that's going to be super telling. And if the Saints win, it's probably going to be because of that. And if the Seahawks win, holy shit, there's going to be some excitement about this offense.
All right, Jeff. So what's your prediction in this game? Give me a score.
I think the Saints are going to win a close game. I just think things are kind of normalized for the Seahawks offense. And I just wonder about how they handle that front in New Orleans. So I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think 23-20 for the Saints. But again, I think there's potential for turnovers, and I think it's going to be Andy Dalton at quarterback this week.
Yeah, sure looks that way. Dayna, what is your prediction and score?
I hate to say it too, but I think the Saints are going to win this game. I think they're going to bounce back from that game last week in London. I think every game this year is going to be a close game. It just seems to be that way, except for San Francisco. So I have the Saints winning 31-27.
Wow, high scoring. That makes some sense. I would be encouraged if the Seahawks put up 27 on this defense. That'd be a good sign on the road. So the stakes are increasing for me each week, because so far I am a perfect 4 for 4 in my predictions, Dayna.
I know you are. I know you are.
I
am not.
And look, the Seahawks offense, the 1 week where they played poorly, like legitimately poorly, was against a defense in San Francisco that's right now, so far, doing something like from a yards per play perspective that hasn't been done for like 20 plus years. Like they're playing at an extremely high level, and I think we might not have even known how high of a level when they played them in week 2. So that's something to keep in mind. I think we saw them also. The coaching staff said, we're gonna take the reins off of Geno in week 3. We're going to let him play. And we saw the result. It wasn't just dinking and dunking anymore. He started pushing the ball down the field, and it was working effectively. We saw him and DK look like the type of duo that you want to see in a quarterback with that kind of receiver last week, and the tight ends. And a lot of the plays looked like these are things that should be able to work against most teams. I'm predicting something weird's going to happen in this game. I'm predicting that the Seahawks defense is actually going to play a better game, and I think we're going to get frustrated with the Seahawks offense. And it's going to be weird. We're going to be catching ourselves like, what is going on here? Why is the Seahawks offense not able to move the ball as well as we're used to? And the Seahawks defense is actually getting off the field. So I think it stays relatively close in the first half. I think, like Jeff, I think it's going to be a lower scoring game than we've seen. I have the Saints winning it, though. I'm going to go 20-17 this week. So that would be a huge step forward for the defense.
I'd actually I'd be happy with that. Even with the loss. I mean, that would be great.
It's funny. Like, you're right in the big picture. That's probably true. But I'm just so much more enjoying watching this offense right now, as much as I'm a defensive person. If we don't get to keep this like fairy tale story going on with Geno, it would take a little bit of the wind out of my sails, to be honest. I've really enjoyed. I love an underdog.
It's been the best part of watching.
I love an underdog, and I love when people dismiss us in the Northwest and dismiss the Seahawks, and then we just get to crap all over their dreams. Like, I love that. So I'm hoping all that continues, but as of now, that is my prediction, is that the Seahawks will unfortunately come up on the short side of this one. 10 a.m. game. Pete's only lost one 10 a.m. game in the last few years. This last Sunday was another one. So looking forward to waking up early, watching that game. And until then, we will say goodnight. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you haven't already, please give the show a like. It doesn't take long. Subscribe to the channel. We're still growing the channel and would love to get more subscribers. Click the bell to get notified so you know when we go live. Maybe the Seahawks make some move and we need to come on and talk to you about it. And then go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, be a patron, support the show, get access to the Slack channel, the community that's growing there that's super fun and chill, and help us support the charities that we support. So would love to see you all do that. Join the crew. And until then, we will see you on Twitter. Enjoy. Have a great night. Go Hawks.